Ever feel like your brain's sprinting a marathon, but like also trying to remember where you put your keys and what day it is?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think we've all been there.
It's like focusing is this epic battle against, well, everything.
Right. And it's not just our phones and notifications either.
That's what's so fascinating about this deep dive, right? Turns out people have been wrestling with distraction for centuries. Literally.
That's why we're looking at John Cassian.
A monk who lived back in the Roman Empire, we're talking about 1600 years ago, and he wrote a whole guide on focus.
How to Focus. A monastic guide for an age of distraction. Wild, right?
And even if you don't live in a monastery promise, no chanting required here. His advice is shockingly relevant.
It really is. It's like he tapped into something essential about how our minds work.
So no hair shirts or anything?
Uh-huh. No, none of that. Though he did have some strong opinions on what you let your mind consume, so to speak.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. But before we get to mental diets, let's back up a bit. Who was this Cassian guy, and why should we care what he has to say about focus?
Well, picture this. It's the 4th century AD. The Roman Empire is in full swing, and Cassian's this scholar, a thinker, totally fascinated by the inner workings of the mind.
Okay, I can see it. And I'm guessing he wasn't scrolling Twitter in his downtime?
Not quite. He actually spent years living with monks in Egypt, studying their practices for finding peace and clarity.
Because to them, focus wasn't just some self-improvement thing. It was key to, well, everything.
Exactly. It's the foundation for their spiritual practice, their understanding of the world, everything.
So what was his big secret? Did he have like a 5th century version of a meditation app?
Well, he had a system. And it might sound a little unexpected at first.
I do love a good plot twist. Lay it on me.
He said you need a clear goal. And not just one goal, actually, but 2.
2 goals. Okay, I'm definitely going to need more explanation on that one.
He used these words, scopos and telos, to describe them. Think of it like, I don't know, planning a trip.
All right, I'm with you.
So your telos is your final destination, the big picture reason you're even going on the journey.
But you also need to figure out how to get there.
Exactly. And that's where scopos comes in. Those are all the smaller steps, the mini goals that keep you moving in the right direction.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how this connects to focus, even outside of, ancient Egypt.
Totally. Cassian actually uses the example of a farmer to explain it. Imagine a farmer whose big dream, their telos, is a huge harvest.
Right, tons of crops, big success.
Exactly. But to get there, they need their scopos, those daily tasks, planting the seeds, watering, weeding, all those little steps that lead to the big goal.
Makes sense. So for our 4th century monk friends, what was their big telos?
Well, for them, it was reaching the kingdom of God, a pretty big goal.
You could say that, but what about those daily steps, their scopos? What were they focusing on every day to get there?
Cultivating something he called clarity and tranquility of the heart.
Clarity and tranquility of the heart. Okay, that sounds lovely, but also like maybe a little vague. What did he actually mean by that?
He was talking about having a mind free from distractions, a mind that wasn't constantly being pulled in a million directions like a chariot with a team of runaway horses. To him, that inner stillness, that tranquility, was the foundation for achieving any worthwhile goal.
Okay, clarity and tranquility of the heart. Sounds great in theory. In theory, but like actually doing that in our world, it's kind of like trying to meditate in a hurricane.
You are preaching to the choir. Even Cassian, dedicated monk, that he was admitted to struggling with distraction.
Oh, so I'm not alone in feeling like my brain has an 8-second attention span. That's oddly reassuring.
You're in good company. He actually compares the distracted mind to, get this, a runaway horse.
Okay, that tracks. So how did they deal with mind wandering back in the 4th century? Did Cassian invent noise-canceling headphones or something?
Not quite, but his advice is shockingly relevant. He said you can't stop those distracting thoughts from popping up. Like, our brains are getting brain right, but...
There's a but.
Yeah.
There's always a but.
But, he said, we can choose which thoughts we let hang around and which ones we just kind of let drift on by.
Okay, that makes sense. Easier said than done, though.
100%.
Yeah.
He uses this great analogy to explain it, though. He compares our minds to a millstone. You know, those giant grinding wheels?
Yeah, I think I've seen those in, like, historical reenactment villages or something.
Exactly. And he says our minds are like that millstone. They have to grind up whatever gets poured in.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly feeding your mind, I don't know, negativity, worries, the news, guess what you're going to get?
A whole lot of overthinking and anxiety.
Bingo. It's like the opposite of a healthy meal plan for your mind.
Ooh, mental diet. I like that.
Right. And Cassian was way ahead of his time in realizing how important that is. He said the key to avoiding all that mental junk food is to constantly be feeding your mind spiritual material.
Now, I know we've established you don't have to join a monastery to get something out of Cassian's advice, but spiritual material, does that mean we all need to start chanting Gregorian chants or something?
Not necessarily. Remember, that was just his version of a mental cleanse. What he was really getting at is the power of being intentional about what you're letting your mind consume.
So instead of scrolling through social media before bed, maybe pick up a biography of someone inspiring. Or listen to some calming music instead of the news.
Exactly. Think of it like creating a little mental sanctuary. What books, music, art, or even conversations leave you feeling grounded and focused?
It's like making a playlist for your mind. Love it.
Wow.
Okay, so we're curating our mental diets, swapping out the doom scrolling for, I don't know, a nature documentary or two. But what about those times when even then your mind is just all over the place? Like you're trying to focus on work and you're thinking about grocery lists and that email you forgot to send.
Oh, I feel that. It's like our brains have this talent for going from 0 to 60 in like half a second.
Right. Did Cassian have any, like, emergency strategies for those moments when you're trying to wrangle your mind back to the task at hand?
He did. And it's actually something super practical. He called it a prayer rope.
A prayer rope. Okay, now I'm picturing monks doing some kind of intense jump roping routine while contemplating the meaning of life.
Not quite. Though I'm sure they were great at jumping rope.
Hmm.
No, this was more about having a tool to help focus the mind. So it was this rope with knots tied in it, and they'd use the knots to count repetitions of a short verse or phrase.
So kind of like a mantra you repeat over and over.
Exactly, like a mental anchor to pull you back to the present moment.
I can see how that would be helpful. Sort of like a reset button for your brain when it starts to spiral.
Precisely. And get this, Cassian actually suggested a specific verse. "Oh God, come to my assistance. Oh Lord, make haste to help me."
Now, I know not everyone listening is religious. Heck, I'm not even sure Cassian himself meant this literally all the time.
I think you're right. It's less about the specific words and more about what they represent. It's about recognizing when we're struggling, when we need support, and calling on something, whether that's faith, inner strength, even just taking a deep breath to help us refocus.
It's like remembering that we're not alone in those moments, even if it just feels like us and our crazy busy brains. But you know, there's one more piece of Cassian's focus puzzle I find really interesting.
What's that?
It's not enough to just stop feeding your mind distractions. You got to actively replace those thoughts with something better, something nourishing.
Oh, 100%. Cassian actually uses a really great analogy for this. He compares it to, well, cleaning a house. Imagine you go through and you clear out all the clutter, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So all the old furniture, the broken appliances, everything's got to go.
Yeah.
But then you don't bring anything new in.
It still feel kind of empty, not exactly welcoming.
Exactly. So just like we talked about with our mental diets, we can't just stop at clearing out the junk. We have to actively cultivate a mind that's full of things that inspire us, uplift us, help us grow.
It's like, what are we putting on the shelves after we clear out all the clutter?
Exactly. For Cassian, this was all about sacred reading. But for us, that could be anything that feeds our minds in a positive way.
So maybe it is time to pick up that biography, listen to that podcast, or just go for a walk in nature.
Right. Whatever works for you. The key is to be intentional about it, to choose things that nourish your mind and help you become the person you want to be.
Because as Cassian would probably say, we become what we consume mentally and spiritually as well as physically.
I think you'd love that. It's
Yeah.
all connected. And that's what's so amazing about his work. It's still so relevant today. Even though he was living in a completely different world, he had this deep understanding of how our minds work.
Absolutely. And I think one of his most powerful insights was that we have more control over our attention than we often realize. It's not always easy. We're fighting against centuries of, well, being human.
And a whole lot of modern day distractions.
Right. But Cassian reminds us that it's a battle worth fighting, that focusing our minds isn't just about getting things done, it's about living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So next time you find your mind racing, maybe think back to John Cassian and his prayer rope. Remember that you have the power to choose where your attention goes, and that choosing to focus on what matters most is a gift you give not just to yourself, but to the world.